we go into happy hour, where we discuss any other business. Now, because we're not a D&D podcast, even though we do talk about a lot of D&D, we're a tabletop RPG podcast.
Yeah.
Okay.
So maybe we should start talking about other tabletop RPGs.
Wait, there are other tabletop RPGs?
I know, right?
I mean, no, listen, there's 4th edition, 3.5, 3rd,
Yeah,
2nd,
yeah.
1st.
Yeah.
All that.
Yeah.
And
AD&D.
Pathfinder. That's basically it.
Well, I mean, Pathfinder is a good example of if you want to play sort of D&D with more complexity. I know that's sounds a bit of a dirty word, but Pathfinder is an extremely complex system where I think a lot of people decry it as being too complex, but the Final Fantasy game that I mentioned was using the Pathfinder rules.
Okay.
And that complexity added such a rich layer of fun gameplay. You know, just the different ways you could build. You know, you can have two ranges that are built so different.
Okay.
But I think what I want to get onto is what alternate systems have we played? I mean, what are our kind of favorite alternate systems that people out there who may not have heard of could get into, and why? I mean, Anton, like, I know you haven't played as much D&D as, say me and Dan. So let's start with you. What sort of other alternate systems have you played with?
So mostly with Dan as the DM, actually only with Dan as the DM, we have touched upon some Shadowrun type games. And the system, there's been a few systems we've used. I don't remember what they're called, but mostly it's all about the type of game that is Shadowrun, and specifically it revolves around each session is its own specific mission. So there's a prep phase, which is usually half the session, and then there's an action phase. So you prepare whatever target building you're gonna get in this cyberpunk-esque universe, and then you put into action. And it plays very, very fast. You get a lot of things done in a session. I really like that pace of game. And it's very, very deadly as well. So you're really playing a high-stake game.
Yeah. The Shadowrun campaign we have played, is actually, it's been 2 systems. So the first one we played was using the Shadowrun Anarchy
That's right. Yeah.
systems with some tweaks. And now we're playing it again, which is a version you see on the channel that's using the Sprawl, and then an add-on called Shadowrun in the Sprawl.
And the Sprawl is much simpler than Shadowrun Anarchy.
We'll link the Sprawl. Dan, do you want to point to the top corner so I can't reach across your screen? Other side there. We'll link it up there for you. So if you click on the card, we'll link the Sprawl game for you.
I mean the Anarchy version, I had like a Google Excel spreadsheet with several tabs. That was my character sheet, just because we ended up rolling like 15 dice at any given point to figure out what my. It was getting complicated, but again, the type of game that I was very different to D&D, and it was great. It was really good fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, I watched the video, and it looks very, very a lot of fun to play. I was kind of a little bit envious I wasn't involved in that one, but maybe next time.
It's an interesting thing. So, I mean, no one's going to deny that D&D is massive, right? And it's reasonably accessible for a lot of people. Like, I'm not going to say it's the easiest rule set to get into, because it's not. It's also not the most difficult, so that's cool. And the thing is, D&D does heroic fantasy really, really well.
Yeah.
Because it's so readily accessible, there's a lot of hacks and mods that allow you to kind of change it into, so there's like the D20 modern, and
you could do 5e Star Wars probably.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there literally is a 5e Star Wars website. There's a page for Final Fantasy 14 5th edition rules with Final Fantasy 14 classes. So, there's a lot of people that take the 5e or the D20 rule set and layer on top. That's cool. I think it's a shame when people just do that and call it a day, when actually there are other rule sets which just do what you're looking to do better, because they're kind of specifically designed to do that, right? So, Anton, like, I wouldn't dream of running Shadowrun using the 5th edition rules.
No, it wouldn't feel the same, and I struggled to understand why. I think it might be the pace, the rules, because Shadowrun's very narrative driven, and D&D, I think it's more rules driven if you play it
Well,
normally, I guess.
Ironically, it's only more narratively driven in our games. So the actual Shadowrun rules from now Catalyst are they are simulationist.
Okay, right. Okay.
They are real crunchy. Like you, and in a world where at any given point your character can have cybernetics, guns, gun modifications, bullet types.
It was quite
specific lighting.
right.
Yeah, it gets a bit weird. But if Shadowrun, for example, is inherently a heist game. Generally speaking, it's a heist or it's a mission game, right? So when you look at games like Blades in the Dark or The Sprawl or any of these ones that are designed to be a RPG about career criminals going off and doing a job, those games are specifically designed for it. And Anton, I think we all agree that the Sprawl rules that we use just fit beautifully.
Yeah,
because when you're in the modern world, you don't need granular rules for what type of phone you're making a call on.
Yeah.
And it allows you to tell I think a better story when when you're using the right rule set.
I guess you're right, because it is a very specific type of game. It is a heist, and what you want to be doing is you want to be building tension at various points in the story, right?
Yeah.
Because it is that short form format. It's like a novel, really.
Yeah.
And the mechanics allow you that, because when you roll, you get successes, but if you fail, there's a consequence.
Yeah.
So each roll has a consequence built in.
Yeah.
And that's really intriguing, and that fits well within the scope of that heist mechanic we're going for.
I mean, another game that I've played with you, Carl, that I really enjoyed, that again I just don't think would necessarily fit in like a D20 system, was Feng Shui.
Yeah, Feng Shui. That's a great system. Again, very narratively driven. Very simple on the dice rolls as well. Like. A lot of your characters have sort of preset numbers, but it's based on sort of 2d6. I think the only sort of thing is you do have to make sure the dice are different colored, because you're subtracting one dice from the other, and then whatever's left is what you're adding to your skills. But it is a system that is basically lives on the philosophy of the more ridiculous something in, the more the more bonuses it should get.
Well, it's basically like those cheesy 80s action sort of martial art type.
I think films. They were inspired by Big Trouble in Little China.
Yes, 100%.
I mean, that is, if you're going to play a Feng Shui game, watch Big Trouble in Little China and then plan it. It's 100%. It's got magic, but one of the classes is the trucker, which was the main character was literally a trucker. And things like that. So the idea is just ridiculous.
Yeah.
But yeah, I loved that system, and I would love to play it again at some point.
It just like that system just inherently let us have the zaniness of that kind of Hollywood over the top martial arts ness.
Yeah, it also goes in with like mooks aren't really statted, because the idea is you could throw 100 mooks at 5 players. And those 5 players are going to leave that room, and there's going to be like 99 mooks on the floor with one cowering in the corner, So it's that
which you'd never be able to do in D&D. You wouldn't be able to have that scenario play out.
No.
Like mechanically, it's just not going to work out. It's like there's this whole other world in terms of visuals and mechanics that you're never going to be able to do in D&D.
But it's D&D. I think to suddenly be thrown 100 mooks in D&D just seems wrong. It just, even though when you look at high fantasy, like the Battle of Helm's Deep, for instance, in Lord of the Rings, that is like 1,000, Urukai against like 500. The idea of high fantasy is there, but I don't think D&D plays into that.
No, not for large scale, sort of combat.
Well, there's something you mentioned earlier, which there's actually a system I think that works better for it. You mentioned Star Wars D20 system. And Dan, you also mentioned being a gang sort of traveling through a criminal gang. Fantasy Flight's Genesis system, which is basically based on narrative dice. It wasn't originally this system. This system was readapted from another system they made. So Star Wars Edge of the Empire by Fantasy Flight Games. You play a bunch of ne'er-do-wells in the Outer Rim. And all the dice are basically what you refer to as narrative dice. So they don't have numbers or anything. It's basically a bunch of D8s and D12s and some D6s. But they don't have numbers, they have symbols. Success, advantage are the positives, and critical, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
And on the negatives, failure, disadvantage, and critical failure. Your successes are cancelled out by your failures. Your advantages are cancelled out by your disadvantages. And your criticals don't touch each other, they happen regardless. But the idea is whatever you roll, as long as you have one success, what happens, happens.
Okay.
So, but because you have this advantage and disadvantage system, you succeed. You can have 2 successes, but 1 disadvantage. Yeah. So narratively, your game master be like, okay, cool, you do the thing. You're running along the gangplank shooting your laser pistols, but your disadvantage is you run out of ammo, or you accidentally shoot out the light. But then it works on the flip side as well. If you have 2 failures and an advantage, okay, you're going along the planet but you're shooting as well as a stormtrooper, you miss everything. But with your advantage, you hit the panel on the door and the door closes, giving you a breather for a few moments. And
you can have very simple systems like that just work, and then you're essentially storytelling at that point with a tiny bit of randomness built in.
Exactly, and that's what I like about it, because even if you watch a Star Wars film, even when things are going wrong, they're getting a reprieve somewhere, and I like that system because it gets that feeling as, failure isn't failure, it's just a hiccup in the road, and success doesn't always mean it's going your way. To use this Star Wars scene, Han Solo chasing the stormtroopers through the Death Star, turns around the corner, and suddenly he walks into the barracks. It's that idea. He succeeded, but he had a lot of disadvantage, or maybe he even had a critical failure there. So he succeeded in what he wanted to do, but you push the narrative, change it into a new direction. And I like the Genesis system for that, because it's very easy to then put that to any situation. And they've been expanding it a lot, but I think Fantasy Flight did pull out of a lot of their RPG stuff, so it hasn't had any major changes recently. My only criticism with the Genesis system is higher level characters do break the game. Because when you're rolling with sort of like at best 4 sort of dice that you're upgrading and stuff, it's fine. But when you're starting to roll larger numbers of dice, the narrative can break when you're suddenly dealing with 6 successes with 6 disadvantages, and you're suddenly like, as a games master, you're sitting there like, I don't know, the world explodes. You do get pushed a little bit. So while as good as it is, it can break at later levels. So that would be my only criticism of that system.
No, that makes sense.
But it's definitely worth a look. I've had some fun with it, especially in the Star Wars game. So that's one I'd recommend checking out.
That's quite good, because I feel like with that system, every roll is a story beat.
Yes.
So basically, in your 3-hour session or 2-hour gaming session, you're hitting like 30, 40, 50 story beats during that duration. In D&D, you basically hit like 5 story beats, like realistically, kind of, maybe more, but that's main story beats. You usually have about 5, I find.
I think it's because the D20 system, the way it's structured, it's kind of inherently binary. Either you do the thing or you don't do the thing. Like a DC is like, do I pass or fail? Whereas, the Genesis system, Star Wars system, the sprawl that we had, there's a granularity to your success, and I think it's especially fun when, if you succeed and fail in equal measure. Like Powered by the Apocalypse, which is what the system the sprawl runs off of, a lot of the time it allows you to choose your penalty. Like you choose narratively how you're set back, and that stops it feeling bad because you're making an active choice. Even if the options are horrid, you can still kind of feel that this weird sense of pride and ownership. When you're like, no. I'm going to choose to fall into the chasm.
That becomes collective storytelling at that point.
Yeah, precisely. I think when it comes to alternate RPGs, like a lot of really good RPGs don't get a look in because a lot of people's campaigns using more popular RPGs, they're usually long term. So it's just like, we already play D&D. once or twice a week, I can't play another game. But something that I've kind of really come onto recently are one-page RPGs. There are a lot of RPGs that are designed to be quick to learn, quick to play. They're not designed to be full-on campaigns, but like they're really, really good for one-shots or just, the DM can't make it this week, so we could all still get together and play a one-page RPG. And a lot of them are actually incredible. They're actually incredible. You'll find a lot of even like the big hitters like Critical Role, High Rollers. They play these kind of one-page RPGs on their off weeks. So really popular ones are Honey Heist, where you are career criminals attempting to pull off a heist at an international expo. You are also bears. We did a charity stream recently, and in the space of one day, we've got through 3 different RPGs.
Very good RPGs.
3 very good RPGs. So All Out of Bubblegum, which invokes that feeling of the kind of the Arnold Schwarzenegger-esque 90s action films. Lasers and Feelings, which was like a over
pulp
sci-fi space opera type thing, and then my favorite, which was Jason Statham's Big Vacation. And the thing is, because there are, these rules are just whimsical, they're silly, they're fun. If nothing else, they really help you to
open up,
work your improvisational skills. Soon we will have the Jason Statham's Big Vacation video up on the channel, and you'll see me straining. Like you'll see me working to work through some of that.
Did I contribute to that in any way, Dan?
A little bit.
Yeah.
I think the chat was mainly responsible for that one.
Yeah.
Oh, were they? Yeah, they were.
So, you've got all these one-page RPGs, and the other amazing thing is a lot of them are free. So, really, what excuse have you got? Just download them, give them a go. I've even taken one-page RPGs such as Everyone is John, and used those as one-shots in my D&D campaign.
Yeah, we did.
Just like reprieve.
Everyone is Ebenezer, didn't we?
Everyone is Ebenezer. But there are other RPGs which are a bit more involved, but still good for one-shots. So a system I know I really want to play is Dread. Because, again, D&D doesn't necessarily do horror particularly well, but we have this RPG that has this inherent building, tension-building mechanic that makes you actually feel nervous and feel fear in your own body as you go through the game.
No,
and that's because the mechanic is not like the mechanic that you use isn't a dice, it's a Jenga tower.
Ooh.
Every time
I know this system.
Every time your character goes to do a thing, you have to take a block out the Jenga tower. And the harder the thing is, the more blocks you have to take. And if the tower stays up once you're finished and it's not your turn, you live. But if the tower falls, you die. As you open the key, try to hack the keypad on the door, you feel the alien slime dribble down your shoulder as you look up and see the snapping jaws of the alien come out the air duct. From a bush, the hockey mask wearing killer materializes with a fire axe above his head. And that's it. And Dread is supposed to be a one-shot game, but that's fascinating. Because when you think about tabletop RPGs, a lot of the time you think, well, it's got to have dice, right? But no, this has got a Jenga tower. That's incredible.
I think I try to actually include that in a game of mine as a mechanic to try and drum up the horror. Only my players decided to go in a completely different direction, and I bought a Jenga tower and it's sitting on the table and I'm ready, and then suddenly they're like, oh no, we do this. I'm just like,
suddenly they're playing Jenga.
They're picking up Jenga pieces.
If nothing else, playing these other RPGs will let you kind of give you this new perspective on things that you may not like about the RPG you regularly play, but then at the same time give you ideas on how you could improve them through sort of home rules. Or
we haven't actually mentioned Stars Without Numbers yet, which is a system I'm currently looking up to possibly do a one-shot for. But the morale system we mentioned in the DM's table, that's where it came from. It came from Stars Without Numbers, that just to keep fights more interesting. But I don't want to go into too much with it because I don't know much about it. I'm still doing my research. But it's definitely a system that has gained my interest because I see a lot of narrative options. And I think when I look at alternate systems, that's what I look for. What's the narrative play? That's why Genesis spoke to me, because it flexes my improvisation muscle.
Yeah.
Because suddenly I'm having to think, what does advantage and disadvantage means? It's why I really liked the Tales from the Loop system. But a lot of it is, you don't succeed a lot because you have to hit 6s. So again, it's trying to keep the plot going without dragging it down by keeping it interesting. So I like those systems that, as you said, trying something new away from D&D, because you'll actually learn a lot of new skills and a lot of new tricks.
Yeah. On that note, I think alternative game systems are really good at giving two things, I think. When you translate them to D&D, it's changing the pace, because D&D does tend to have its own pace. So when you play these different systems, you'll learn to actually use different types of pace, faster or slower, and also zooming in and out of the action. I think that's also something that you can sometimes overlook when you're playing D&D and you get too focused on one thing, and sometimes you just want to take it completely out or zoom in much further. And I think playing these different games kind of let you touch upon that.
Yeah. Just lets you adjust your focus.
That's right.
Readjust your focus. Like if you're having a very combat heavy D&D campaign, then if you take a chance to play, I don't know, like Call of Cthulhu or Vampire the Masquerade, and then go, so fighting things isn't always the best thing to do. Like it helps promote that kind of lateral thinking.
I like those systems that combat becomes more deadly, because you don't throw yourself into combat every turn. You actually look for ways out of it. Or if it is, if you have to fight, then you're more likely as players to sort of look for the ways to put that fight to your advantage, because one shot is probably going to kill you. So you look for the cover, you look for the vending machines, you suddenly start creating the environments. You're like, is there like tables around? And you as a DM are sitting there like, well, yes, I imagine there would be. You're in this sort of thing. I flip a table for protection. It makes it a bit more collaborative, which is what I like as well. I like collaborative games where the DM and the players are working together.
Imagine playing D&D and your character dies with one hit. Like, it just won't work.
Yeah, it's called being a level 1 wizard.
Yeah. I guess you're right, yeah.
And that was him opening the door.
You play D&D, but everyone's a level 1 wizard. It just doesn't work. But those are the games that you experience that, and it works. You can play that game that way. You just have to get creative.
But it also, I think, really boosts the story, because it's sometimes a character death for like getting into a bad gunfight because that guy decides to punch that other guy, and it's not you who gets killed, it's your colleague. That affects you as a character. So it's things like that. I like that sort of like more harmful combat, because things can go wrong that may be your fault, but the people who didn't cause the problem suffer as a result of it. So things like that also, I think it really does. And it comes back to that narrative thing. So these alternate systems. I mean, we could go on all day about different systems. So to keep things short and snappy, everyone sort of do at least 2 systems for people to check out that you think that everyone will enjoy. Anton.
Sure. The Sprawl is very good that we've started playing, and Monopoly. Those are my 2. I mean, Monopoly is a very good role-playing game.
I was not expecting that.
Yeah.
I mean, you're role-playing, I guess, right? Like
you're role-playing a
today
tycoon.
I'm going to be the boot.
Yeah, you role-play a tycoon. That's really what you should.
I mean, you guys are role-playing Monopoly very different to how I am, because in my family, we're all, we're playing table flippers.
Yeah, you're role-playing a Family Feud is what you're doing.
Yeah, exactly.
Dan, what about you?
Oh, God.
I would recommend going for... I recommend Dread, because it's so different to everything else, and it's got that really unique mechanic with the Jenga tower. And I'm also going to put my money on Jason Statham's Big Vacation because it is just
it's a lot of fun.
It's just chaos incarnate.
Pretty much.
Uh,
You call?
So, first and foremost, Feng Shui. Just because that was such a fun system, and just because it's balls to the wall insane sometimes. If you have particularly a games master who really enjoys films like Big Trouble in Little China, yeah, you'll really enjoy that one. And I mentioned as well, Tales from the Loop, mainly because that's a really good game where you and your game master work together. As players, you're fully expected to come up with your own scenes, and it's really fun playing as kids because there is no fear of dying, but you can end up being really upset and everything. So I really like that for that particular element. So there's definitely one to check out.
Awesome.
Nice.
Good advice.
Oh, well, that bell, it means it's last orders. So enjoy your drinks while you can, for the tavern will be closing shortly. Gentlemen, where can the people find you? Anton?
I can be found on the Twitter at TBD_Anton. You can send me some tweets, ask me about builds, check me out on BYOB. That's me.
Yeah, you're getting better at the tweets.
I'm trying. We're trying it out.
We're dragging you into the 21st century.
We're getting there.
Dan?
Yeah, I'm becoming a pro at this. So you can find me on Twitter at DMDanT. You can find me on Instagram at DMDMT. And you can find us on the Explorers of Elsewhere YouTube channel. Hurrah!
Hey!
As well as on audio for videos and audio versions on major streaming platforms.
And you can find me at Group Stormbear. That's GROOP Stormbear. That's Twitter and Instagram. And you can follow us here at the tavern at Tavern Between. Again, Instagram and Twitter. Obviously, with our format, we shall be launching the full episode first Friday of every month. And then weekly video segments of each of the different parts on YouTube on the Explorers of Elsewhere channel. So the tavern is now closing. Please be careful and respect our neighbours as you leave. I hear a dragon has taken root in one of the dimensions and is making travel a little difficult. So
she's really grumpy.
He's really grumpy. So put your fireproofs on before you leave. Have a good one, guys.
Take care, all.
See ya.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for watching. Release segments like this from the Tavern Between Dimensions every Friday here on the Explorers of Elsewhere channel. Otherwise, if you want to listen to the episode in full, you can check us out on Spotify and Amazon Music.